Thanks for joining today. My name's Jonah. I actually haven't introduced myself in a lot of videos, so I'm just going to introduce myself again for those of you that are new to the channel. So thanks for joining today. We're going to be talking about attachment and detachment in a little bit of detail. This really stems from Buddhist teachings. It's basically the concept of attachment to reality and things, and then detachment is the opposite of what attachment is for the most part. And then I wanted to also dive into kind of the some of the concepts of detachment and how that can be taken a little bit too far. I've actually been reading a really good book recently. It's called Nature, Man, and Woman. It's by Alan Watts. He's a fantastic author. If you like Aldous Huxley Eckhart Tolle, there are two other great authors, but they kind of live in the same space with a lot of kind of their views on the world and how they kind of approach things. So I wanted to kind of give a little insight into my understanding of attachment and detachment. So we'll start with attachment first. So basically what attachment is in essence attaching yourself to this physical reality. In the Bible, Jesus actually says, I'm going to go back and quote different things, but he mentions in the Bible and says that basically it's fine to participate in the world but not be of it. And what that really means is when you start to attach yourself to things, it, in essence, like for example, I'm trying to think, like a computer, like everything in essence, and I mentioned this in some previous videos, everything is temporary. So attaching yourself to temporary things honestly creates suffering and pain that doesn't necessarily have to be there if you understand that everything around me, this house, I just got a new watch, so this watch, my phone, hell, even this book, are eventually, they're going to go away. And I mean, they'll physically go away, they'll deteriorate, they're going to break. Another great example that in this book that I read, it was basically, I gotta pull out the book. I cannot remember exactly what it's called, but it was basically, the title was an introduction to Zen Buddhism, I believe. It was an introduction to Zen Buddhism. And one of the chapters in the book really dives into attachment and talks about the concept of, like, so you have, for example, like a mug, a coffee mug, and let's say you drop it one day and it breaks, and you're upset at yourself and you're maybe a little angry or, you know, just distraught that you broke the coffee mug. Hell, maybe it was your favorite coffee mug. Funny part is, if you went into buying that coffee mug knowing that at some point it's going to break, like either from you, external forces or something, hell, it might just spontaneously blow up. I mean, I don't think that would probably happen, but who knows? Anything's possible. So the thing is, though, is knowing that everything in essence is temporary. The only thing that isn't really temporary is you, which I don't mean your physical body. I literally mean your soul. That is the one thing on this planet. That's the one thing that exists in this reality that is eternal and will live on forever. Not necessarily here on this earth, but you will transcend beyond this place. So the funny part, going back to that mug, is knowing that mug is going to break at some point. That is, in essence, kind of the art of detachment. So attachment is basically attaching yourself to temporary things. Another great example, and I'm going to mention a paradox. It's really funny how with like relationships, for example, be it friendships, like marriage, you know, you're dating or whatnot, you're seeing someone on a more long-term basis. It's interesting that the more you, in essence, like put in effort and attach yourself to that person in almost kind of like a needy, desperate way, the further they get away from you. And that's with really everything. Attaching yourself. I had a strong attachment to my mother when I was young. I was adopted at a young age, so that's kind of stems from a lot of it. I didn't really know my biological parents a whole lot growing up, but I knew of my biological mother because she was my grandparents adopted me, so, but I didn't really see her a whole lot. I don't really remember most of that, the first like 3 years of my childhood when she was around. But basically, when my mother passed, I had such a strong attachment to her, it completely threw me for a loop and just, I mean, it kind of, in essence, I don't want to say destroyed my identity, but I lost kind of a rooting something that rooted me to reality. And that's the thing that I'm trying to drive home with attachment, is that when you root yourself and attach yourself to something in this reality and knowing that everything's temporary, you're honestly going to suffer unnecessary pain when that loss occurs. And that can be anything. And that's not, and here's the thing, I don't want people to interpret that as saying like, don't, like, it's not, it, like, it's okay to feel emotions. It's okay to enjoy relationships with people. It's okay to, buy it's not a new phone, but buy a phone. It's okay to, have a computer and whatnot. It's just, don't attach yourself to things that eventually it's all going to end. And the concept of relationships eventually end. And like the ones that do last, like you do end up getting married and you're with that person for the rest of your life or something like that. One of you will eventually die. And that's the ultimate thing. It's like understanding, like, or maybe fortunately, I think it was the Notebook? God, I cannot, I think it was the Notebook where they both died. The two main people both died in the same bed at the same time, which I imagine is very rare. But ultimately you die alone. And that's not like a bad thing in any way, but the ultimate thing is to understand that attaching yourselves to temporary things to the point where it's like you require and need them, that can get a little bit hairy, because it's you're causing your soul unnecessary suffering and pain. And the thing is, suffering and pain aren't a bad thing. It's a great way to grow. It's how you look at suffering and pain. But unnecessarily attaching yourself deeply to something isn't a requirement to show love towards something. Now, let's move on to the concept of detachment, and we'll do a little smaller segment on detaching from a detachment. That's something I kind of want to talk about a little bit too. So detachment, in essence, is basically understanding. It's pretty much the exact opposite of attachment. It's understanding that everything in this world that we exist in is temporary. It is whatever you want to call it, illusion, world. I believe Jesus and like Buddha and all these people, pretty much every spiritual leader calls the world an illusion. And in that concept and understanding, because everything's temporary, it is in essence an illusion. None of this is like permanent. So with knowing that there's no permanence in anything, you don't need to attach yourselves to things. But that also doesn't mean you can't enjoy the world. Like I said earlier, Jesus said it's like participate in the world, just don't be of it. So that means, in essence, like, it's okay to have relationships, it's okay to go out and buy things, but just understand, like, don't become so ingrained in those things that it, in essence, almost becomes your identity, to where it's like you can't define yourself without external forces. And that's a terrible spot to be in, because I was there personally when I was younger, and I battled a lot of that, honestly, through middle school, high school, college, even up to recently, probably like a couple years ago. I'd say like 2-3 years ago, it's kind of when I was really able to kind of break away from that mindset and understand that, like, none of this will last. Like, none of it, like, this body will not last. And that's another thing that I wanted to mention, and I'm going to mention a little bit later, but none of this will last. It's all temporary. So detaching yourself from this temporal state, in essence, gives you an advantage, because now you see the world for what it truly is. And the beauty in that is you can choose what to enjoy, what not to enjoy, and you don't feel like you need things to be fulfilled. And notice I didn't mention happiness. I'm not a person that's like, you need to pursue happiness and whatnot. I'm like more of the concept of just fulfilling, really, like, your heart space, your soul, whatever, but finding that fulfillment and wholeness and oneness. And that doesn't necessarily equate to happiness. So I want to be very clear on that. Now, one example of this is one easy practice and one easy way to kind of get into the, introduce yourself into the art of detachment is detaching from your body. Now, let me be very clear about this, because this is something, one of the topics that was mentioned in Nature, Man and Woman, and I kind of want to dive into it because I agree with it quite a bit. When you detach from things, there shouldn't be animosity, hatred, anger, or anything towards something, or the inability to feel emotion towards things. So, for example, like the body, so your form, your physical body. Detaching from that body basically means understanding that you will like this body is temporary. It will eventually die. It will eventually start to rot away because this is not. It's the body is living because we are we literally are the life that's breathed into it through a higher power. So this is the vessel, but it's not necessarily like what gives it life. So understanding that your body is temporary kind of makes it great because it really eliminates the fear of death because you know you will eventually pass away. And what I really do believe a lot of people are afraid of dying because they're, in essence, none of us know what happens after death, but knowing that we do all die eventually, at least the body dies, it really makes it's a breath of fresh air because you're not worrying about something in the future where it's like, I don't know when I'm going to die. Then just focus on the current moment and just enjoy the current moment to its fullest extent. And detaching yourself from things kind of allows you to do that because now you're not worried about every little tiny thing that happens. I'm not worried how Becky Sue thinks about me or how, my friends think about me or how my parents think about me or whatever. You really don't give a rat's ass about how anybody thinks about you or how the world perceives you. Really the only person, or not even person, the only thing that I don't want to say prove to, but the only thing that in essence really that you should be working towards, like, it's not even impressing is not the right word, just living for is like God, a higher power, which in turn is like living for yourself. Not in a selfish way, but living for God, making the right decisions based off of your, core values. That's really what he wants. And when you detach from things, it becomes a lot easier because now you're not getting all this feedback that you feel like you have to ingest, and like you don't feel needy, you don't feel desperate around really anything. It's like the funny part is, so like another example, this morning I was making a protein shake before going to the gym, and I was closing the bag of, I do I put a couple strawberries in it just to kind of spice it up a little bit, and I was closing the bag of strawberries, and my hand just goes boom and knocks over the little blender thing, and I mean it covered my entire island. And I'm kind of sitting there, and this is at 4:00 in the morning, and I'm just looking at it, and I literally just yell "fuck" to myself. Like, I was really angry. But then I kind of took a step back, and I was like, I literally kind of looked at it, and I was like, this was bound to happen at some point. Never happened before, but I was like, this was literally bound to happen. And then at that moment, I was just kind of like, all right, it's whatever. And I just didn't think about it anymore. I just cleaned it up and moved on with my day, and I was like, we'll just make another one. And it was nice because it was like, just giving that thought of this was eventually going to happen because, the likelihood of something like that happening was going to happen. I was going to spill it at some point. So it's kind of just understanding all right, there's no reason to dwell on it and just get so bogged down and attached to that moment and just move on with it and just detach yourself from that entire situation. Now, with that in mind, I wanted to dive into the concept of detachment taken too far. Now, when people think of detachment, some people really think about the concept of detachment from emotions, and what emotions basically are, it's energy in motion, or it's basically energy with an action. So the concept of angry, a lot of people think of anger and happiness and sadness and all these things as it's almost like a state. It's like you're in a state of anger, but in reality, it's like you're in this action of anger. It's like, I feel angry, things like that. So it's it's not really a state of anger. It's literally it's the actions, you're seething or whatnot. Now, the thing is the concept of detachment and detaching from your emotions, I'm not a fan of. We feel emotions for a specific reason. It's basically to kind of point us into a direction of there's a reason why you're feeling this. Let yourself process that emotion. Don't just shove it down or try to just resist it. Now, here's the thing. And this is something I'm not a fan, though, of being completely overwhelmed by your emotions to where you externalize it to the world. If you're angry, you don't need to go around yelling at people and saying you're angry. You need to figure out the best way that you can basically process it in a healthy manner. Be it, just having a conversation. You don't have to physically talk with yourself, but having a conversation with yourself on why you're feeling the emotion, what triggered it per se, and then kind of just addressing it. You can do that in the moment of feeling that. Honestly, I'm a fan of doing it in the moment, because that's when you're actually having that feeling or episode or whatever you want to call it. Like, so if you're angry, address that in the moment. Don't just shove it down and just, deal. Like, you can shove it down and deal with it 10 years from now when you explode, at your wife, or which is often what happens with a lot of these things, especially anger, resentment, and hate, things like that. Really negative, more what we consider more negative emotions. Cramming those things down and just not addressing them. It's like a pot that's getting ready to boil over at some point. And everybody has their different thresholds for how much of that crap they can take, but most people can only do so much before they finally snap. Now, the thing is, though, is another practice that you can incorporate is, like, let's say you feel an emotion, you just don't really have time to address it, or the energy or whatnot. Make a mental note of it. You could physically write it down as well, like, just so that you can come back and try to understand, like, what you were feeling at that time. Now, again, I'm not a proponent of specifically men being over emotional to where they're, like, showing it and broadcasting it out to the world. I think there's healthy mediums beyond, trying to process it internally. You can journal. That's another great way of, like, processing it. It's an external to where you visually can see it. I know that some people, they might draw, they might create art. Music's another great outlet. I have some friends that they process their emotions through music. Same thing, like, you could use YouTube or a medium through video. But there's tons of ways to really process those emotions in a healthy manner. And again, specifically for men, I'm not a big proponent of being over emotional to where every single thing that goes wrong, or happiness or sadness, or every emotion in the spectrum, you need to necessarily show that to the world. It's fine to process stuff silently and enjoy it, but it also doesn't mean don't feel your emotions. I hate how I wouldn't say hate. I hate how there's some of these self-help male guidance, pseudo father guru, whatever the hell you want to call them, that are like, you need to be stoic as shit, not feel anything. It's like, it's bad to feel your emotions. And not all of them. I think a lot of them are trying to get to the root of, like, don't show your emotion externally to the world, or you don't need to show it externally because it kind of shows some weakness per se. But I'm also like, we all feel emotions, some more than others, but addressing those emotions and processing them is healthy. It helps you grow in maturity significantly, specifically emotional maturity, because you can understand what you're feeling at that time, why you're feeling it, and the best way to go about potentially even using that emotion to your benefit, but also just figuring out how to process it. The worst thing you could do really is resist feeling like, so like if you're feeling negative and shitty, one of the worst things you can do is like resist those emotions and just be like, I don't want to feel negative and crappy. Like, I don't want to feel this. And then you kind of just don't address what's going on. That eventually just builds up in the back of your mind. So looking inward and being like, okay, why do I feel depressed? Why do I feel sad? Why do I feel angry? Figure out the root cause of that, or the trigger, or whatever, kind of got you to that, emotion, or that energy in motion, or energy in action, or whatever you want to call it, and then figure out either a plan, or just work through it. Because when you work through it, it actually just kind of dissipates and lets go of itself naturally. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. I think they think that you can just resist an emotion or resist something and it eventually goes away. It doesn't. You're resisting it. So it's just like, let it happen in a way that's healthy, so that eventually it leaves you like a weight dropping off your shoulders, or just kind of being lifted away. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I would love to hear your comments about attachment and detachment, and any practices or anything you use, or anything that you or your interpretation of it, specifically in the context of spirituality or Buddhism. So otherwise, thanks for tuning in today. And honestly, if you would hit that like button, I would greatly appreciate it. It does help the channel grow. And then also, I it feels weird asking for this, but if you want to hit that subscribe button, that'd be awesome as well. I'd really appreciate that. Just want to get this message out to as many people as possible. Really just trying to help people grow internally and kind of figure out the best way to really work in the right and work in the right mind and just leave a net positive in the world. Because again, this is all temporary, but it would be nice while we're here to leave some, some benefit before we leave somewhat of a, legacy behind. It would be cool to kind of have a few people be like, yeah, like this was a solid person. And I'm not going to say good or bad. This was a solid being that existed in the time that they were here. So I'll leave you at that. Thanks again for tuning in today. I will probably catch you tomorrow. I'm planning on posting another video. If not, though, I will see you as soon as I create a new video. All right. Have a good one.